I sincerely hope that this lighting is good enough. Hey all you Hillmaniacs, it's Hillminator. In case you can't tell by this setup, I am struggling to light everything correctly, and as such you get this horrible monstrosity. But hopefully it doesn't look too bad. I have no idea, I can't really tell. Anyway, it's getting towards Christmas, and we all know if there's one thing that Christmas always brings, it's future students stressing about writing personal statements. Yeah, I see you there. But what advice could I possibly have to give you? I mean, gosh, it's almost as if you need someone who's been through the UCAS system recently and understands it relatively well. Gee. Well, you're in luck, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm here. Tip number 1 is to actually be passionate. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But it's important. It's first off, you're passionate about your course. If you aren't passionate about your course, no one will actually want you at their university, and they're just going to skip right past you in your application pile. So let's actually find a course that's right for you. If you want help on doing that, then you can watch one of my previous videos. I'll link it in the description below. Really, Josh? You're going to self-advertise? Darren, how did you get here? Well, after you left me, I took the train myself. It was messy. Can't have been that bad. You don't want to know. Okay. Well, regardless, you need to convey in your writing that you are passionate about it. Tip number 2 is to start early, which I'm presuming you haven't done considering we're in mid-December, but you've still got plenty of time. The UCAS application deadline isn't until what? January 15th? Now this is important because these admission people can tell when you've just been lazily relaxing and then all of a sudden realise that you actually need to do it, or when your student is genuinely wanting to do something. It's useful to start early for a number of reasons, the main one being these academics have seen thousands of these personal statements. They can tell when you've just started 2 days before the deadline or not. In general, they can tell when you've started 2 days before the deadline or not. 9 times out of 10. So make sure you get as much time in as possible to actually get your statement to a significant quality, because you don't want to not get into your first choice of uni because you couldn't be bothered to put the effort in. Tip number 3, don't begin with a Q. What I mean by this is a question or a quote. Starting your personal statement with this is the most cliche thing in history. Everyone does it. And if everyone does it, you're not going to stand out, are you? Personal statements are meant to show how individual you are and why the university wants you specifically. So don't let them think that you're just like everyone else by starting with the same dry quote and question. Now, if it's a sufficiently unique question or quote, something that is very unusual or thought-provoking, that isn't something that you would normally expect, and that your own teachers can't answer, because trust me, they will be the key people to decide whether it should be a good question or not, then there might be an exception, but 9 times out of 10, don't start with that. If it's a question that nobody in your school can answer, no teachers or anything, then it might be worth looking into, but I wouldn't necessarily say definitely start with it. Number 4, link everything back to what you want to study. Everything. You're going to cite a book? Tell them why it's important to what you want to study. You're going to talk about your work experience? Tell them what skills you learned that will be important to what you study. You learned skills from working? How do those skills relate to what you study? Everything is linked to what you want to study. Do not let anything be unlinked. It is all one massive chain that connects fundamentally to that. Don't lose track of the main reason that you're making this application. Because you want to study. Tip number 5 all revolves around a percentage split in your essay. And don't get me wrong, a personal statement is 100% an essay. It's just an essay on you. The heck are you on about percentage split? I'm just gonna write about me. Yes, but what part of you, Darren? Your academic life or your extracurricular life? And how much weight should you give to each one? A good general balance would be to say to give 70% of the weight to your academic life and 30% to your extracurricular. Now, this changes vastly if you're applying to an Oxford University, Oxford, Cambridge basically, maybe Durham as well. In those circumstances, you're going to want to go at least 80% academic, 20% extracurricular. You could even potentially push it all the way to 90%, but that might be a bit of a risk. I split it more 60% academic, 30% work and extracurricular, and then 10% kind of just saying why that subject in particular appealed to me because I was doing a joint honours subject. However, this does not work as a rule for everyone. Make sure you look into it yourself and have a good think about what you need. Also, if you're doing a joint honours, then you need to be more careful with your percentages. Number 6. It can be useful, though not 100% necessary, to include a narrative through line. What do I mean by that? Well, if you are going to set up a quote or a question in the first paragraph, which I've already recommended against, then this is probably what you're going to want to do. Link back to it. I know the last point was all about linking, but I mean, this is essentially the same point, only with a narrative through line rather than just wanting to study something. Some of my friends had great narrative through lines in their personal statements, such as how the theme of power and control in a particular book relates to their wanting to study of a politics course, and they did that by quoting the book at the start and then continually referring back to the quote and linking not just to what they wanted to study but to the quote as well. Essentially, this is like having a double anchor rather than a single. Not necessary, but it's a fun idea and it's useful. Tip 7. Flippin' referencing. Like I just said, my friend would reference a book or a quote. Now, that's good, but do you always want to be doing that? No. Sometimes you want to be referencing just a particular piece of evidence to show that you have a particular skill. How can you do that? Take something that you've learnt in class, an activity that you did, and apply it. For example, in my essay, in my personal statement when we were talking about RS and what I've learnt from that, I applied my deduction and critical thinking skills to my counter-arguments against Jeremy Bentham's principles of utility. Yes, that was a very wordy sentence. With my Welsh Baccalaureate, I applied my researching skills, which I needed for a particular project within Welsh Bac, and mentioned what I was studying in that project in order to evidence my own researching skills, and then I established that I would use those to help me in my course. Like I said, double anchoring. Even extracurriculars can be useful for this. Let's say you want to study anthropology and you've been working at a shop. How can you possibly say that this relates to both your course and that you've gained these skills? Evidence-specific things. Working in retail has really opened my mind up to a variety of different people groups, and I was curious to see how they interacted with them with their own people groups, other people groups, and with myself. And boom, you've just got a place on your favourite anthropology course. Number 8. Remember the word limit. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is more heartbreaking than when you finally finish your personal statement and then you realise you're going to have to cut out about 70% of it. Or you realise that you have to add another 1,000 words. Word limits are cruel masters, but they're important. Try to get as close to the word limit as humanly possible. If you've got too many words, then you're going to want to compound them. If you've got too few, then uncompound. Use less intellectual words, and yes, that may seem counterproductive, but these universities don't actually care whether you sound smart or not. They care about whether you, as an individual, seem right for their course. So don't worry about the intellectual words. Feel free to cut out the intellectual words and use smaller words to convey the same thing. Compounding and lengthening, they may sound like they wouldn't make much of a difference, but they are massively useful skills. And if used correctly, you may easily be able to cut or add 100 words. Tip number 9. Get ready to have your heart ripped out and stomped all over the floor because it's time to edit your work. Now there are those rare exceptions where virtually the first draft with a couple of grammatical changes is fine. Yes, I was one of them. I am annoying. But in general, it's going to take at least 5 drafts to get through this. I know people who went through 27 drafts in order to get their personal statement right. And that is fine. Don't feel bad because you haven't got it right first time. No one expects you to know how to apply to a university. You haven't done this before. And if you have, then that doesn't matter either, because it's a completely new start when you restart applying. Editing and reworking your own writing is going to be a pain in the backside. So you need to be ready to destroy your own work in order to finally get what you want. I'm afraid you're going to have to do what every published author in history has had to do. Rework your entire thing. Cut paragraphs, delete lines, kill off your main character, all of the important stuff. Well, maybe not that last one. Personal statements, like any piece of writing, will require editing. No one has produced a perfect piece of writing first time. Tip 10. None of these tips are concrete rules. There's always an exception to them. And to be honest, I kind of was the exception to all of them, which doesn't make me the best person to tell you how to write a personal statement, but this is how I'm saying that the majority of people should do it, because this is how the majority of people who I found get into unis did it. This is how all of my friends who have been at universities did their stuff. 90% of the time you will need to do a personal statement in this style. So that was all 10 tips for how to write your personal statement. I hope that they were useful for some of you. I'm going to write my personal statement out down below. This list acts as a good guideline. It's stuff that you should do. However, it's perfectly possible to write a good personal statement without doing any of these things. Except being passionate. Running out of memory, so I gotta go. Okay, thanks for watching. I shall catch you next time.